Before we get started, please like and subscribe. Let me know where you're watching from, and you can support the channel by clicking thanks or joining. I received the invitation on a Tuesday morning in late October. It was tucked between a utility bill and a grocery store flyer. Plain white, no return address. The paper felt thicker than it should have, almost stiff, like it had been pressed flat for a very long time. The envelope was addressed to me in neat block letters. Ethan Cole. Seeing my name written like that sent a faint chill through me, though I could not explain why. I slit the envelope open with my thumb and pulled out a single sheet of paper. The invitation was simple. You are invited to stay at the forest cabin. Arrival date November 14th last year. Departure date November 17th last year. There was no signature, no explanation, no address. I checked the postmark. It was stamped yesterday. For several seconds, I stared at the dates, convinced I was misreading them. Last year, the invitation was dated exactly 1 year ago, down to the day, November 14th to November 17th. 3 nights, already long past. My first instinct was that it was a mistake, some kind of printing error or cruel joke, but the paper smelled faintly of pine and damp wood, and when I ran my fingers across the ink, it felt slightly indented, as if the words had been pressed into the page rather than printed. I should have thrown it away. Instead, I sat down at the kitchen table and read it again. There was something unsettling about how final it felt, like the invitation had not arrived late, but rather I had. I turned the page over. There was nothing on the back except a single sentence at the bottom, written smaller than the rest. You were expected. That was when the unease settled into my chest. I live alone in a small apartment on the edge of Portland. I do freelance graphic design, which means I spend most of my days staring at screens and most of my nights unable to sleep. Isolation had become normal for me long before that letter arrived, so the idea that someone expected me somewhere should have felt comforting. It did not. I searched my email. Nothing. I checked my calendar from the previous year. November 14th had been a Thursday. I had no travel plans, no vacation days, no memory of being invited anywhere. Curiosity got the better of me. I typed forest cabin invitation into a search engine. Nothing relevant came up. I tried variations, retreats, rentals, remote cabins. Still nothing. Then I searched my own name with the phrase forest cabin. The results page loaded slowly, and when it finished, my stomach tightened. There was one link. It was a forum post dated 13 months ago. The title read, "Looking for Ethan Cole who stayed at the forest cabin." I clicked it. The post was short. Too short. If anyone knows Ethan Cole, please tell him the cabin needs him back. He did not finish his stay. There were no replies. I scrolled through the comments anyway, half expecting something to load that would explain everything. The page ended abruptly, like someone had cut it off mid-thought. I leaned back in my chair and laughed quietly, more out of nervous habit than humor. Someone with my name had stayed in a cabin somewhere. That was all. Ethan Cole was not exactly rare. Still, the timing bothered me. the dates, the fact that the invitation arrived now. That night, I dreamed of trees. They stood impossibly tall, packed so closely together that no sky was visible between them. The forest floor was covered in needles that muffled every sound. I walked for what felt like hours, but the scenery never changed. Then I saw the cabin. It sat in a clearing that should not have existed, a simple wooden structure with no windows on the front, only a door painted a dull, peeling red. A single light glowed inside, steady and patient. I reached for the door handle. I woke up before I touched it. My heart was pounding, my sheets damp with sweat. The smell of pine lingered in the air, faint but unmistakable. I told myself it was just a dream. The next morning, I found mud on my shoes. I had not left the apartment. I stood there in my kitchen, staring at the dried earth caked into the soles, my mind scrambling for a reasonable explanation. Sleepwalking, maybe. Stress, a trick of memory. I cleaned the shoes and went about my day, but the invitation stayed on my counter, impossible to ignore. By evening, I had made a decision I did not fully understand. I packed a small bag, clothes, a flashlight, my phone charger. I folded the invitation and slipped it into my jacket pocket. I still did not know where the cabin was, but something in me was certain that it knew where I was. When I locked my apartment door behind me, I had the sudden, overwhelming feeling that I was not leaving for the first time. I was returning. I drove north as the city dissolved behind me, concrete giving way to trees that grew thicker with every mile. My phone lost signal sooner than expected. First, the bars dropped to 1, then nothing at all. The GPS froze on a stretch of road that no longer existed on the map. That should have been my cue to turn around. Instead, I kept driving. The invitation had not given me directions, but the farther I went, the more certain I became that I was going the right way. It was not a thought so much as a pressure, a steady pull behind my eyes, guiding my hands on the steering wheel. The forest closed in around the road. Pines leaned inward as if listening. Sunlight struggled to reach the asphalt, breaking through in thin, uneven bands that flickered across my windshield. The air felt colder here, heavier, carrying the damp scent of soil and old leaves. After an hour, I passed a wooden sign nailed crookedly to a tree. No services next 40 miles. Beneath it, someone had carved another message directly into the bark. Do not sleep. I stopped the car. The engine ticked softly as it cooled. The forest was silent in a way that felt deliberate, as though sound itself had been swallowed. No birds, no insects, not even wind. I told myself the carving was a prank, a warning meant to scare tourists. Still, I found myself staring at it longer than necessary, my chest tightening as the words settled into my thoughts. Do not sleep. I drove on. The road narrowed until it was barely wide enough for one car. Eventually, it stopped being paved at all, dissolving into packed dirt and gravel. My tires crunched loudly, the sound unnaturally sharp in the quiet. That was when I noticed the trees changing. They were not just tall, they were wrong. Their trunks twisted at unnatural angles, bending back toward the road. Some leaned so far inward that their branches nearly touched above me, forming a dark tunnel of needles and shadow. I felt watched, not in the vague way people often describe, but with a specific certainty, like something unseen was tracking my movement, counting each second I spent inside the forest. I tried the radio. Static. I tried my phone again. Still dead. The road curved sharply, and without warning, the cabin appeared. It sat alone in a clearing that seemed carved out of the forest rather than grown naturally. The trees stopped abruptly at the edge, their roots tangled together as if refusing to cross some invisible boundary. The cabin itself was small, just as it had been in my dream. Wooden, weathered, silent. The red door stood out violently against the gray wood, its paint cracked and peeling. There were no windows facing the clearing, no chimney, no signs of life. I parked the car and stepped out. The air here was colder than it had been on the road. When I exhaled, my breath fogged faintly. My ears rang, adjusting to the absence of sound. I circled the cabin slowly. There were windows on the sides and back, but they were dark. The glass so dirty it reflected more than it revealed. I caught my own reflection more than once, and each time it startled me like I was seeing a stranger. At the rear of the cabin, I found a set of footprints in the dirt. They led from the forest to the door, only one set. They were adult-sized, deep, as if the person who made them had been very tired or very heavy. There were no footprints leading away. My stomach twisted. I told myself the obvious explanation. Someone had walked in while I was still driving up. They had not come back out yet. That explanation did not account for the fact that the dirt around the prints was dry. It had rained earlier that morning. I remembered the slick roads near the city. These footprints should have been washed away or at least softened by water. They were perfectly preserved. I reached the front door. Up close, the red paint smelled sharp and metallic, like old blood and rust. The door handle was cold enough to sting when I touched it. For a moment, I hesitated. The words from the tree echoed in my mind. Do not sleep. I pushed the door open. The cabin interior was dim, lit only by thin strips of light leaking through gaps in the walls. Dust hung motionless in the air. The space smelled of pine, mildew, and something else I could not place. Old breath. The room was simple. A wooden table, 2 chairs, a narrow hallway leading deeper into the cabin. On the table lay a guest book. I flipped it open. Names filled the pages, written in different styles, different inks, some neat and careful, others rushed. Shaky dates accompanied each entry. Most of them ended the same way. Arrival date, departure date. Except for the last few, those entries stopped after the arrival. No departure. The final name made my throat go dry. Ethan Cole. Arrival date, November 14th last year. My hands trembled as I shut the book. That was when I realized something else. The cabin was warm, not recently used warm, not sun-heated warm, lived in warm, as if someone had been there moments before I arrived. as if someone was still there. And as the door behind me closed on its own with a soft, final click, I understood with growing certainty that the forest had not erased me yet. It was waiting for me to sleep. I stood in the center of the cabin, listening to the silence settle around me like dust. The door had closed without force, without sound beyond a soft click that echoed longer than it should have. I tried the handle. It turned easily. The door was not locked. That made it worse. I stepped back inside. The hallway stretched farther than it should have. From the doorway, the cabin looked small, barely enough space for a single room and a back area. But the corridor extended into shadow, its wooden floorboards darker the farther they went, as if absorbing light. I told myself it was just perspective. I took a few cautious steps forward. The air grew warmer with each pace, thick and close, carrying the scent of old pine and something stale beneath it. My footsteps sounded wrong, dull and muted, as though the floor were padded beneath the wood. The first room on the left was a bedroom. A narrow bed sat against the wall, neatly made with gray sheets pulled tight. The pillow was indented, not freshly, but not long ago either. The fabric still held warmth. I pulled my hand back quickly. Across from the bed stood a small dresser. On top of it lay a folded set of clothes, jeans, a flannel shirt, worn boots placed carefully beneath. None of them were mine. The second bedroom was nearly identical, except the bed was unmade. The sheets were tangled, twisted violently as if someone had thrashed in their sleep. Deep creases marked the mattress, forming the unmistakable outline of a body curled inward. The imprint was wrong. The proportions were off. Too long, too narrow. I backed out of the room, my pulse pounding in my ears. At the end of the hallway was a third door, slightly ajar. Light spilled from within, steady and pale. The bathroom, the mirror above the sink, was fogged, as if someone had showered recently. Water droplets clung to the glass. I wiped a small circle clear with my sleeve. For a moment, my reflection stared back at me, then it blinked out of sync. I staggered backward, nearly slipping on the damp floor. My reflection smiled when I did not. The expression was subtle, fleeting, but unmistakable. I looked again. Normal, just my face. Pale, tired, afraid. I laughed softly, my voice sounding too loud in the small space. Stress, exhaustion, fear feeding on itself. Still, I turned away from the mirror without looking back. The final door at the end of the hall led into a common room larger than the front area. A couch sat facing a stone fireplace that showed no sign of recent use, yet the stones radiated heat. The firewood stacked beside it was warm to the touch. On the wall above the mantel hung a clock. It had no numbers, only hands. They moved slowly, dragging themselves forward with visible effort. Each second tick sounded wet, like something sticking and tearing free. I checked my phone. No signal. The time displayed was wrong, not just incorrect, but impossible. The date flickered between months, then settled on November 15th last year. My throat tightened. I had not slept, yet the cabin insisted I was already inside the past. A sudden sound broke the stillness. Breathing, not mine. It came from behind the couch, slow and deliberate. I stood frozen, every muscle locked as the sound grew louder. I waited for a shape to rise. Nothing did. The breathing stopped. In its place came a whisper, low and intimate, brushing against my ear. "You are early." I spun around. The room was empty. I stumbled back toward the front of the cabin, my mind racing, searching for logic that no longer fit. The guest book lay where I had left it, closed on the table. I opened it again. New ink stained the page beneath my name. The letters were still wet. Stayed first night. My hands shook so badly I nearly tore the page. I slammed the book shut and backed away. That was when exhaustion hit me. Not gradual, not natural. It crashed over me like a wave, heavy and irresistible. My eyelids burned. My limbs felt filled with sand. The warmth of the cabin pressed in from all sides, coaxing, encouraging. I remembered the warning carved into the tree. "Do not sleep." I dragged myself toward the door. Halfway there, the hallway shifted. The walls seemed closer together, the floor stretching longer beneath my feet. Each step took more effort than the last. The bedrooms passed again, then again, looping impossibly. My vision blurred. The bed appeared in front of me without warning. The first bedroom, the neatly made one. The sheets were turned down now, inviting. I collapsed onto the mattress before I could stop myself. The warmth wrapped around me instantly, perfect and suffocating. The pillow cradled my head, as if it knew the shape of my skull. As my eyes closed, I felt the cabin breathe with me, slow, deep, satisfied. The last thing I heard before darkness took me was the soft scratch of something being written. I woke to darkness so complete I thought I had gone blind. For several long seconds, I lay still, listening to my own breathing, waiting for my eyes to adjust. They never did. The bed was warm beneath me, too warm. The mattress seemed to mold itself around my body, supporting me in places I did not know needed support. When I tried to move, my limbs felt heavy, sluggish, as if the air itself had thickened overnight. Then I realized something else. I did not remember falling asleep. Panic flared, sharp and sudden. I forced myself upright. The darkness receded just enough for vague shapes to emerge. Wooden walls, the outline of the dresser, the faint glow of light leaking under the bedroom door. The cabin was breathing, not loudly, not dramatically, just a subtle expansion and contraction, a slow creak in the walls that matched the rhythm of my chest. When I inhaled, the wood seemed to tighten. When I exhaled, it relaxed. I swung my legs over the side of the bed. My feet touched the floor and sank slightly, as if the boards were softer than before. My phone lay on the nightstand. I grabbed it and pressed the power button. The screen lit up immediately. No service, no notifications. The time read 3:17 a.m. The date beneath it made my stomach drop. November 15th last year. I rubbed my eyes hard and checked again. The same. I had slept against every warning, every instinct. I had slept. A sound drifted through the cabin. Footsteps, slow, careful, barely touching the floor. They came from the hallway. I held my breath and listened. The steps paused outside my door. The handle did not turn. Whoever stood there seemed to be listening instead, waiting. I backed away from the door, my heart hammering. The footsteps resumed, moving farther down the hall. I stepped into the hallway. The cabin looked different in the dim pre-dawn light. The walls appeared closer together, the ceiling lower, the air pressed down on me, heavy with warmth and the faint smell of damp earth. The second bedroom door stood open. I did not remember leaving it that way. Inside, the bed was empty now, perfectly made. The twisted sheets from before were gone, smoothed flat, as if no one had ever slept there. The third room showed the same, 2 beds, both untouched. My pulse quickened. At the end of the hall, the common room waited. The clock above the fireplace ticked loudly now, each movement of the hands exaggerated, deliberate. The time matched my phone. 3:17. I stared at the clock until my eyes burned. It did not move. A whisper rose behind me. Still here. I turned. No one. I spun in a slow circle, my breath shallow. The words echoed again, softer this time, coming from the walls themselves. Most do not wake up after the first night. I staggered back, bumping into the table. The guest book slid across the surface and fell open. A new line had been added beneath the last entry. Ethan Cole stayed first night. I felt something loosen in my chest, a thin thread pulling free. Memories flickered at the edges of my mind. Small things, details that should have been solid. My apartment number, the name of the street I lived on. They slipped away when I tried to hold them. I slammed the book shut. No, I would not let this place take me. I rushed for the front door. It opened easily. Outside, the forest waited. But it was not the same forest I had driven through. The trees stood closer together, their trunks thicker, older. The clearing was smaller, the edges creeping inward. The sky above was a dull gray, frozen in a perpetual half-dawn. I stepped onto the dirt. It was warm. The footprints from before were gone. In their place, dozens of shallow impressions covered the ground, overlapping, circling the cabin like a slow procession. None of them led away. A low sound rolled through the forest. Not wind, not animals, voices, too many to count, layered together in a murmur just below understanding. I backed toward the cabin. The voices grew louder. Names surfaced within the sound, whispered and repeated until they lost meaning. My name joined them. Ethan, Ethan, Ethan. I slammed the door shut and leaned against it. Gasping, the cabin shuddered gently, like something pleased. I slid down to the floor, pressing my hands over my ears. I did not know how long I stayed there. When the sounds finally faded, the clock ticked again. 3:18. 1 minute had passed. I understood then what the cabin did. It did not erase people all at once. It took them slowly. One night, one memory, one name at a time, and I had already given it my first. Morning arrived without light. The gray outside the windows did not change, only thinned slightly, as if the forest allowed a little more visibility, but no warmth. I woke on the cabin floor with my back against the door, my neck stiff and my mouth dry. For a few seconds, I could not remember why I was there. That frightened me more than anything else. I searched my thoughts for the details that should have come easily. My age, my job, the city I lived in. They were there, but distant, like words written on fogged glass. I knew they existed. I could not touch them. I pushed myself up and stood unsteadily. My legs trembled as though I had walked for miles instead of sleeping for a few hours. The clock in the common room ticked again. 7:02. The date beneath it read, November 15th last year. The cabin wanted me to believe the night was over. I moved to the table and opened the guest book. The pages felt thicker now, heavier in my hands. Beneath my name, another line had appeared. Stayed second night. My stomach dropped. I had not slept again. I was certain of it. Yet the cabin had marked time on its own terms. I flipped back through the book. Names blurred together. Dozens of them. Hundreds. I tried to focus on one at random. Sarah Whitman. Arrival date, October 3rd. No departure. I closed my eyes and pictured her. Nothing came. No face. No voice. Just the name, floating without weight. That was when I noticed the scratches. They covered the underside of the table. Shallow lines etched into the wood. I crouched down and traced them with my fingers. Letters emerged. SARABEN. MICHAEL, the same names from the book. Each one repeated dozens of times, carved deeper and deeper until the wood was nearly split. My breath caught. The names were not written neatly. They overlapped, jagged and desperate, as if the carver had been racing against something unseen, against forgetting. A sound came from the hallway, a low murmur, not whispers this time, but speech. I followed it slowly, every step heavy with dread. The second bedroom door stood open. Someone was sitting on the edge of the bed. He was thin, his shoulders hunched forward, his hands folded loosely in his lap. He wore a flannel shirt and jeans, the clothes from the dresser in the first room. He looked up when I entered. "Do you remember me?" he asked. His voice was hoarse, strained from disuse. I shook my head. He nodded, as if he had expected that. "I used to sleep here," he said. "Second bed, always too cold. Then one night it felt warm and I stopped waking up all the way." My chest tightened. "What is your name?" I asked. He opened his mouth, closed it. "I know I had one," he said. "I wrote it everywhere, but it keeps slipping." His eyes flicked past me toward the doorway. "It is closer today." The room darkened subtly, the corners pulling inward. "How long have you been here?" I asked. He smiled weakly. "Longer than I can count." The cabin creaked softly, a sound like contentment. I backed away. When I reached the hallway, I turned back. The bed was empty. The sheets were smooth. I stumbled into the bathroom and splashed water on my face. The mirror reflected me faithfully now, but something was wrong. My eyes looked unfamiliar, as if they belonged to someone I had met briefly and forgotten. I pressed my palms against the glass. My name formed on the fog behind my breath. ETHAN. The letters blurred and ran downward, dissolving before I could trace them again. No, I would not let it take that. I grabbed the flashlight from my bag and headed outside. The forest greeted me with silence. The trees leaned closer than before. The clearing had shrunk again. The path I remembered from the road was gone, swallowed by roots and undergrowth. I walked anyway. The forest resisted me. Branches snagged my clothes. The ground shifted underfoot, uneven and warm. The farther I went, the heavier my thoughts became. I forgot why I was walking. I stopped, heart racing, and forced myself to speak aloud. My name is Ethan Cole. The sound felt fragile in the air. I said it again, louder. The forest answered. Ethan. The voice came from behind the trees, from the soil, from the space inside my skull. I ran back to the cabin. By the time I reached the door, my lungs burned and my head swam. I slammed it shut behind me and slid down, shaking. The clock ticked. 1200. The date did not change. I felt something shift inside me, another thread loosening. I knew then what the cabin wanted. Not my body, not even my memories. It wanted my name, because once that was gone, there would be nothing left to return. I woke to the sound of my own voice. Echoed through the cabin, low and uneven, as if spoken by someone who was not used to using it anymore. For a moment, I did not understand what I was hearing. Then the words registered. Ethan Cole. I was sitting at the table, the guest book open in front of me, my hands resting flat on the page. My mouth was dry and my throat burned, as if I had been speaking for a long time. I did not remember sitting down. The clock on the wall read 11. The date remained November 15th last year. I looked down. Beneath my name, a new line had appeared. Stayed third night. The letters were darker than the others, thicker, pressed so deeply into the page that they had torn the paper slightly. My chest tightened. I stood up too quickly and the room swayed. The cabin adjusted with me, wood creaking in protest, like joints shifting under weight. The air felt heavier than ever, pressing against my skin. Something was wrong with my thoughts. They no longer arrived whole. Ideas came in fragments, images without context, feelings without memory attached to them. I tried to think of my apartment again and found only a vague shape. A room, a window, nothing else. I walked to the hallway, repeating my name under my breath like a prayer. Ethan, Ethan Cole. The sound felt thinner each time I said it. In the second bedroom, the bed was occupied again, not by the man I had seen before. This one was older. His hair was gray and patchy, his face lined deeply, like it had been folded too many times. He sat cross-legged on the mattress, staring at his hands. When he looked up, his eyes widened with recognition. "You are still you," he said. For now, my stomach lurched. "Who are you?" I asked. He hesitated. "I used to be Thomas. I think that name feels right when I say it slowly." He tested it on his tongue. "Thomas." The sound lingered in the air, then thinned. "It used to belong to me," he continued, "but the cabin needed it, took it, gave me something else in return. Something else." He smiled faintly. Silence. I backed away. In the common room, the fireplace was lit now, flames licking stone that should not have been able to burn. Heat rolled toward me in slow waves. On the mantel, beneath the clock, something new had appeared. A wooden plaque. One name was carved into it. Thomas. The letters were fresh, still pale, still clean. I stared at it, dread pooling low in my stomach. That was not a memorial. It was a vacancy sign. The whisper came again, closer than before. Names must be replaced. I spun around. The room was empty, but the air vibrated with expectation. I felt it then, a subtle pressure in my chest, as if something were being pushed inward, making space. Another name brushed against my thoughts. It did not belong to me, Not yet. I fled toward the door. The forest outside greeted me like an open mouth. The trees were closer than ever, their branches tangled together, blocking what little sky remained. The clearing had shrunk to a narrow ring of dirt around the cabin. I stepped out anyway. The ground pulsed faintly beneath my feet, warm and soft, like muscle. With each step, my thoughts grew slower, heavier. I forgot why I had come outside. I stopped, panic flaring, and forced myself to think my name. I reached for it and found resistance, as if it were no longer mine to use freely. Ethan Cole. The words tasted wrong. The forest leaned closer. A different name surfaced. Calm, familiar. I screamed and ran back inside. The door slammed shut behind me on its own. I collapsed against it, gasping, my head pounding. The cabin hummed softly. Pleased, I crawled to the table and opened the guest book again. The pages near the back were different, newer, blank, waiting. A pen lay beside the book. I did not remember owning one. I picked it up. It fit my hand perfectly. I pressed the tip to the page. My hand trembled, fighting against a pull that felt both external and internal, like gravity applied to thought itself. I wrote a letter, not my name, another. The moment the ink touched the paper, pain lanced through my skull. Memories flared and burned away in rapid succession. Faces without names, places without meaning. I dropped the pen, screaming. The word on the page was incomplete, only the first letter. Ah, the cabin shuddered. The whisper grew sharper. Finish! I clamped my hands over my ears. No! I tore the page from the book and crumpled it in my fist. The cabin groaned. Displeased, the clock ticked forward. 2:12. One more minute lost. I understood then. The cabin did not just erase people. It recycled them. It stripped away what they were and used the remains to fill the spaces left behind. Names were currency. Identity was fuel. And I was running out of both. I woke standing up. For a moment, I did not understand what that meant. My body was upright, balanced on my feet, my hands pressed flat against the cabin wall as if I had been bracing myself. My muscles ached with a deep, dull soreness, the kind that came from holding a position too long. I could not remember lying down. I could not remember sitting. I only remembered waiting. The wall beneath my palms felt warm and faintly damp, like skin after exertion. When I pulled my hands away, the wood creaked softly, almost reluctantly. The clock read 1:04. The date still insisted it was November 15th last year. Time no longer mattered here, only progression. I said my name aloud. The sound startled me. It did not sound like my voice. The tone was flatter, stripped of familiarity, as if someone else were borrowing it. I tried again. Ethan Cole. The second word felt heavier, less willing. I walked into the common room. The fireplace was cold again, the flames gone without ash or smoke. The wooden plaque still hung beneath the clock. Thomas. The letters had darkened overnight, as if absorbing something from the air. I turned away and nearly collided with someone standing behind me. He was young, younger than the others I had seen. Early 20s maybe. His hair was dark and matted, his eyes sunken and unfocused. "Oh," he said softly, "you can see me." My heart hammered. "Of course I can see you," I snapped. He smiled sadly. "That means you are almost ready. Ready for what I asked." to stop seeing us. He gestured around the room. I have been here 2 nights, he continued, or maybe 3. It is hard to tell once the names start moving. The names start moving. What is your name? I asked. He frowned deeply, as if the question physically hurt. I had one. I know I did. It started with a J. Or maybe that is just what I tell myself. He looked down at his hands. When you forget it completely, you stop leaving footprints. I remembered the ground outside, the circling impressions, how shallow they had been. What happens then? I asked. You stay, said another voice. It came from the hallway. An older woman stepped into the light. Her hair was streaked with gray, her face lined with exhaustion and something worse, acceptance. She leaned heavily on the wall, as if the cabin itself were the only thing holding her upright. You stay and help make room. Make room for who? She looked at me with tired eyes. For you, for him, for whoever comes next. The cabin creaked approvingly. I backed away, shaking my head. No, this place does not get to decide that. The young man tilted his head. It already has. The walls pressed inward, subtle but undeniable. The ceiling lowered just enough to make breathing feel deliberate. I fled down the hallway. The bedrooms were different now. In the first room, the neatly made bed was gone. In its place stood a narrow cot, too short to lie on fully. The second room held no bed at all, only a mattress sunk directly into the floor, its surface scarred with deep impressions. The third room was empty, except for writing. The walls were covered floor to ceiling in names. Some were scratched deep, others barely visible, like fading memories. I recognized a few. Sarah, Ben, Thomas, Ethan. My chest seized. My name was already here, written more than once, in different handwriting, different depths. I staggered back. The whisper filled the room. You have been here longer than you remember. Images flashed through my mind, standing at this wall, scratching letters, forgetting why, returning again. I screamed and covered my ears. The sound cut off abruptly. Silence fell, thick and absolute. I opened my eyes. I was alone. The hallway behind me was shorter now, the common room closer. The cabin was compressing. I stumbled back to the table. The guest book lay open. Several pages were gone, torn out cleanly. Only one blank page remained. At the top, a heading had been written in careful letters. Next guest. My hand moved without permission. I grabbed it with my other hand, nails digging into skin. No, I will not prepare the place for someone else. The clock ticked. 1:05. I felt something tear inside me, not physically, something foundational, a sense of before, a certainty that there was a world beyond the trees. It thinned, like mist burned away by heat. I whispered my name again. This time, only the first half came out. Ethan. The rest stuck somewhere deeper. The cabin waited. I stopped trying to count how many times I woke up. Sleep no longer felt like sleep. It came in fragments, shallow drops of darkness that stole pieces of me and returned. Something altered in their place. When I opened my eyes again, I was always somewhere different inside the cabin. This time, I was in the third room, the one with the names. I stood inches from the wall, my forehead nearly touching the wood. The carvings pulsed faintly, as if responding to my presence. Some names were deep and dark, others barely scratched, already fading. I searched for mine. It was there. Ethan, only Ethan. The last name was gone. Panic rose, sharp and choking. I pressed my fingers into the grooves of the letters, trying to remember what used to come after. My mind offered nothing. No image, no sound, just a hollow pause where something important had once lived. A memory without context surfaced, a voice calling me from far away. I could not remember who it belonged to. Behind me, the cabin shifted. Footsteps approached, slow and deliberate. I did not turn. "You are almost finished," said a voice I recognized. It was Thomas, or what remained of him. He stood beside me, thinner than before, his outline less defined, as if parts of him were being erased in real time. Finished with what I asked. He studied the wall, his gaze lingering on the names. With being someone who leaves, I shook my head. "I am not staying." He smiled sadly. None of us planned to. The room felt smaller. The walls crept inward, the ceiling lowering until the air pressed down on my skull. The cabin wants you to understand it before it lets you go, Thomas continued, or before it keeps you. "Understand what?" He gestured at the wall. "We are not prisoners. We are materials." The word struck me harder than any threat. Materials? For what? For continuity. The cabin creaked, approving. I backed away until my shoulders hit the opposite wall. "No!" The cabin responded with warmth, a suffocating embrace that wrapped around me from all sides. Images flooded my mind, guests arriving, names written, sleep taken, identity stripped. Then silence. The cycle repeated endlessly, the cabin persisting while the people inside it changed. I dropped to my knees, gasping. "There has to be a way out," I whispered. Thomas knelt across from me. "There is one," he said, "but it costs more than staying." I looked up. "What?" "You have to give it something it cannot recycle." I waited. "A choice." The cabin groaned, displeased. "It feeds on names because names can be reused, passed on, rewritten." He leaned closer. "But a decision cannot." The words sank in slowly. I thought of the blank page in the guest book. The heading, "Next Guest." I felt the pull again, stronger than ever, dragging my thoughts toward preparation, toward compliance. My name echoed faintly in my mind. Ethan, only Ethan. No anchor. I stood and staggered toward the common room. The table was closer than it should have been. The guest book lay open. The pen waited. I picked it up. This time, my hand did not tremble. I wrote, not a name, a sentence. The moment the words formed, the cabin screamed, not aloud. Structurally, the walls warped, bending inward and outward in violent pulses. The floor buckled beneath my feet. The whisper returned, furious. Names only. I kept writing. I choose not to continue. The pen snapped in half. The lights died. The cabin convulsed. Thomas cried out, his form unraveling like smoke caught in wind. I felt myself tearing free from something deep inside. A hook releasing. The clock shattered. Silence crashed down. I collapsed, breathless. When I opened my eyes, the wall of names was blank, smooth, untouched. The cabin stood still, waiting but uncertain. For the first time since I arrived, it did not know what would happen next. I woke to birdsong. The sound was so unexpected that for a moment, I thought it was another trick. I lay still on the cabin floor, listening carefully. The birds sounded distant but real, layered and uneven, not looping, not echoing. Light filtered through the cracks in the walls, warmer than it had ever been. The cabin was quiet. Too quiet. I pushed myself up slowly, bracing for resistance that did not come. The air felt lighter. The pressure that had weighed on my thoughts for days had loosened, just enough for me to notice its absence. The clock was gone. The space above the fireplace was empty, the wood unmarked, as if nothing had ever hung there. No ticking, no frozen time. I checked my phone, no signal. But the date was different. November 16th, no year. That frightened me more than seeing the wrong one. I stood and walked to the wall of names. It was still blank, smooth pine boards, newly sanded, untouched by carving or ink. I ran my fingers over the surface, half expecting the grooves to rise up beneath my skin. Nothing. The cabin had not forgiven me. It had paused. A sound came from outside. Footsteps. Human. I froze. No one else should have been here. I moved to the door and opened it slowly. The forest looked wrong. Not hostile. Confused. The trees leaned at uneven angles, some pulling away from the clearing, others bending toward it, as if uncertain which way they should face. Sunlight filtered through gaps that had not existed before, breaking the uniform gray. A man stood at the edge of the clearing. He was young, mid-20s maybe. He wore a jacket too thin for the cold and carried a backpack slung over one shoulder. His expression shifted from relief to confusion when he saw me. "Hey," he said, "is this place open?" My mouth went dry. "What did you say?" "The cabin," he replied. "I saw it on a rental site. Directions were weird, but I figured it was part of the charm." My heart pounded. "What is your name?" I asked. He laughed nervously. Mark. Why?" I stared at him, at the way the forest subtly leaned in his direction. Attentive, the cabin stirred behind me. I felt it then, the hunger, raw and urgent. It wanted him. I stepped outside, positioning myself between Mark and the door. "This place is not safe," I said. "You need to leave. Now." His smile faltered. "Is this some kind of joke?" The ground trembled faintly beneath my feet. I felt the pull return, dragging at my thoughts, urging me to step aside, to let the cycle resume. I clenched my fists. "I choose not to continue." The words echoed hollowly. The cabin creaked. Mark glanced between me and the building. "Look, man, I do not want trouble. I just need a place to crash for the night. Do not sleep here," I said, my voice rising. "Do not even go inside." The forest grew louder, not voices. Breath. The sound of something inhaling deeply. Mark took a step toward the door. Pain flared in my head. Images flooded my mind again. Names, beds, walls closing in. I grabbed his arm. "You cannot stay," I shouted. He yanked free, eyes wide. "Get off me!" The cabin door swung open behind me. Warmth spilled out, inviting. I staggered as something inside me strained toward it. An instinct that was no longer entirely my own. Mark stared past me. "What the hell is that smell?" "Pine, mildew, old breath." I turned and slammed the door shut with everything I had. The cabin screamed silently. The forest recoiled. I fell to my knees, gasping. When I looked up, Mark was gone. The clearing was empty. No footprints, no sound, only the cabin, waiting. I understood then. Breaking the cycle had not freed me. It had changed my role. I was no longer a guest. I was the barrier, the thing standing between the cabin and its next name. And as the bird song faded and the forest leaned inward again, I realized the most horrifying truth of all. The cabin did not need to erase me anymore. I was staying by choice. The cabin tested me the very next night. There was no sunset, no gradual darkening. One moment the forest stood in muted afternoon light. The next it snapped to black as if someone had extinguished the world beyond the windows. The birdsong cut off mid-note. Silence followed. I stood in the common room, every muscle tight, waiting for the pressure to return. It did not come all at once. Instead, the cabin worked slowly, methodically, like something probing for weakness. The front door rattled, not from wind, from impact. Something struck the wood from the outside. Once, then again. Each hit was careful, measured. Testing, I moved toward the door. "Do not open it," the cabin whispered. The voice was calmer now, reasonable. "You are tired." I clenched my teeth. "I am not listening." The impact came again, harder this time. Dust drifted from the frame. A voice followed. "Hello." It sounded normal, human, male. "Is anyone there?" I froze. The cabin hummed softly, pleased. "You see," it said, "you cannot protect everyone." The knock came again. "Please, I am lost." I pressed my forehead to the door, breathing hard. "Go away," I shouted. There was a pause, then laughter. It was wrong. Too synchronized, too hollow. The door handle turned. I grabbed it from the inside and held it in place. Muscles screaming. The wood beneath my palms grew warm, then hot. "Let go," the cabin urged. "You are not meant to stand here forever." The hallway stretched behind me, lengthening as if preparing space. I screamed and pushed back. The door buckled inward slightly. The voice outside changed. It spoke my name. "Ethan." The sound scraped through me, stripping something raw. "I do not know who you are," I shouted. Silence, then a whisper against the wood. "We know what you are becoming." The pressure surged. Images flooded my mind. Standing at this door, night after night, turning people away, watching them vanish. My body aging, my name fading, becoming another fixture of the cabin. I faltered. The handle slipped. The door cracked open an inch. Warm air rushed in, thick with pine and rot. I slammed it shut again with a roar. The cabin screamed in frustration. The walls convulsed. Cracks spider-webbed across the ceiling. The knock stopped. I slid down the door, shaking. The clock was back, not on the wall, inside my head. Tick, tick. I knew what the cabin was doing. It was not trying to break me quickly. It was training me, teaching me how to refuse, teaching me how to stay. I laughed softly, hysterically. "You think this is a test?" I whispered. I stood, forcing my legs to obey. "Fine. Test me." The cabin went still. Outside, something moved away from the door. Heavy, reluctant, the forest exhaled. For now, I leaned against the wall. Exhausted, I had passed the night, but I understood the truth. There would be more knocks, more voices, more nights. The cabin was patient, and patience was how it won. The cabin stopped knocking after that. That was how I knew it had changed tactics. The silence stretched unnaturally long, not empty but loaded, like the pause before a confession. Hours passed without sound. No footsteps, no whispers. Even the forest outside seemed to hold its breath. I did not sleep. I sat in the common room with my back to the wall, watching the doorway, my thoughts looping in tight circles. Exhaustion pressed against my skull, but I refused to give in. Sleep was still the one thing I could deny it, or so I believed. The smell came first. Coffee, fresh and unmistakable. My stomach twisted violently. The scent did not belong here. It cut through the pine and mildew like a memory made solid. I stood slowly and followed it. The kitchen area had changed. A mug sat on the table, steam curling lazily upward. Beside it lay a folded newspaper. My breath caught. The headline was local, familiar. The date printed at the top was from years ago, a time when I still had a life. I picked up the mug with trembling hands. Warm, perfect. I heard a voice behind me. "You always took it black." I turned. She stood near the hallway. My sister, alive, unchanged. She looked exactly as she had the last time I saw her, wearing the same jacket, the same tired smile. "This is not real," I whispered. She frowned. "You always say that when you are scared." The cabin watched. The walls held still. I felt something inside me lean toward her. "How did you find me?" I asked. She shrugged. "You stopped answering your phone." That simple sentence cracked something open. Memories surged back with painful clarity. Missed calls, messages left unread, a life abandoned without goodbye. "You need to come home," she said softly. Home. The word hurt. I took a step toward her. The floor warmed beneath my feet. The cabin breathed in. I stopped. "Say my name," I said. She blinked. "What?" "Say my full name." Her smile faltered. "Ethan," she began. The rest did not come. Her mouth moved soundlessly. The illusion wavered. The coffee went cold in my hand. The newspaper dissolved into blank pages. She looked at me with confusion and fear. "What is happening?" she asked. I stepped back. "You are not her." The cabin growled. The walls flexed angrily. Her face twisted, features blurring, stretching. "You could have left it," hissed through her mouth. "You could have been free." I shouted and covered my ears. "No." The figure collapsed inward, folding like paper burned from the center. The room returned to normal. Empty. The mug shattered on the floor. The cabin trembled with rage. "You deny comfort," it whispered. "You deny rest." I slid down the wall, shaking. That was worse than the knocks, worse than the threats. It knew me now, knew what I missed, what I wanted back, and it would use that knowledge again. I stared at the doorway. tears burning my eyes. "You will try again," I said. The cabin did not answer, but the silence that followed felt amused. The cabin waited 3 days before it tried again. Not nights, days. That detail mattered, even if I could no longer explain why. The light outside never shifted. Morning and afternoon blended together into a pale, colorless glow that never warmed the skin. Time had become a suggestion, not a rule. I marked it anyway. 3 meals appeared on the table. 3 cycles of hunger and relief. 3 moments where I almost believed the worst was over. On the 4th day, the screaming started. It came from the forest. A woman's voice, raw and terrified, cutting through the stillness like a blade. "Help me!" I froze mid-step. The cabin remained silent. The scream came again, closer this time. "Please!" I rushed to the door and yanked it open. The forest surged forward. At the edge of the clearing stood a woman clutching her arm, blood darkening her sleeve. She was young, maybe early 30s, her face streaked with dirt and tears. "Thank God," she gasped. I thought no one would hear me. The cabin pulsed behind me. I felt its hunger spike. "Come inside," I said automatically. The moment the words left my mouth, pain lanced through my skull. The cabin screamed inside me. "No!" I stopped myself inches from the threshold. "You cannot stay here," I said, my voice shaking. "I can help you, but you cannot sleep here." She stared at me, confused. "What are you talking about?" Her knees buckled and she collapsed to the ground. I ran to her. As soon as I touched her, images flooded my mind. A car crash, a twisted road, her crawling through the forest, bleeding, screaming until her voice nearly failed. She was real. That terrified me. "Please," she whispered, "just for one night." The cabin whispered too, "Just one." I dragged her to her feet and pulled her toward the door. Inside, now, the cabin throbbed with excitement. The door slammed shut behind us. The warmth returned instantly, enveloping her like a lover. She sighed in relief. "Oh God," she murmured, "it is so warm." I backed away. "Do not sleep," I said urgently. "Whatever happens, you cannot fall asleep." She frowned. "I have lost a lot of blood." "I know." I handed her water, wrapped her arm, did everything I could remember how to do. Hours passed. She grew weaker. The cabin grew stronger. Her eyelids fluttered. I shook her. "Stay awake." She tried to smile. "You are acting like this place is alive." "It is." She laughed weakly. "Then I want to rest somewhere that cares." Her eyes closed. The cabin roared. The walls convulsed. I screamed her name. I did not know her name. That was the choice. Save her body or save her identity. I grabbed her shoulders and shook her violently. "Wake up." She did not respond. The guest book slammed open on the table. A pen rolled toward me. The cabin whispered, "Write her name. Anchor her." I looked at the woman slumped in my arms, her face peaceful now. If I wrote her name, the cabin would claim her. If I did not, she would die. My hands trembled. I whispered, "I am sorry." I carried her to the door. The forest screamed in protest. I dragged her outside and laid her on the cold ground. The cabin shrieked. The warmth vanished. The walls cracked. The door slammed shut on its own. I knelt beside her, pressing on the wound, forcing myself to remember how to help. She coughed. Her eyes opened. She was still breathing. The cabin went silent. I understood then. The cabin could offer comfort, but it could not offer mercy, and I had just denied it both. The forest punished me for what I had done. It did not do it immediately. That would have been too obvious. Instead, it waited until the woman could walk on her own, until her color returned and the bleeding slowed. I watched from the cabin doorway as she limped toward the trees, following a path that should not have existed. She never looked back. The moment she vanished between the trunks, the forest shifted. The sound came first. Metal twisting, glass shattering, a scream cut short. I staggered back as the images slammed into my mind without warning. A highway, rain, slick pavement, headlights swerving too late. I collapsed to my knees, retching. The cabin had not taken her, so it took something else. Did not know where the accident happened. I did not know who was hurt, but I knew with absolute certainty that the woman would never make it home. Not because of me, because of the forest. That was the punishment. You save them here, the cabin whispered. We take them later. The warmth drained from the walls. The air turned brittle and cold. I screamed, "This is not balance," I shouted. The cabin remained calm. It was correcting an error. The forest outside groaned and leaned inward, branches snapping like bones. The next day, the road appeared. I had not seen it since I arrived. Now it cut through the trees like a scar, wet and black, stretching away from the clearing. Freedom, I packed without thinking. If the forest was going to take lives anyway, then staying here meant nothing. I stepped onto the road. The world lurched. The trees blurred. I was standing on asphalt. Cars screamed past me, horns blaring. I stumbled backward, nearly hit. The forest was gone. The cabin was gone. I was standing on a highway. Rain poured down. Sirens wailed in the distance. For a moment, relief flooded me. I had escaped. Then I saw the wreck. A car wrapped around a guardrail, emergency lights flashing, a woman on a stretcher, her face pale, familiar. My knees gave out. She was alive. Barely. The forest had not taken her yet, but it would. I tried to reach her. My feet would not move. I was no longer fully there. People passed through me. I screamed, and no one heard. I looked down at my hands. They were translucent. The cabin whispered gently, "You cannot leave without replacing yourself." The world twisted. Rain became pine needles. Sirens became wind. I was back in the clearing. The road was gone. The cabin stood untouched. The door was open. I stepped inside without meaning to. The guest book lay on the table. A new entry waited. Not a name, a description. Caretaker. My throat tightened. This was the forest answer. Not death, not erasure. Permanent return. I closed the book. No, I am not finished. The cabin did not argue. It did not need to. It knew the truth. Every time I tried to leave, the forest would collect payment elsewhere. And every time it did, the guilt would drag me back. I sat at the table, shaking. The cabin settled around me, patient, certain I had not broken the cycle. I had become its conscience, and that was far worse. The cabin did not wait long after that. It learned. That was the most terrifying part. The next knock came before I had finished cleaning the blood from the floor where the woman had rested, before the guilt had settled into something dull and manageable. The cabin wanted me raw. The knock was polite. 3 short taps. I closed my eyes. "Do not answer," I whispered to myself. The knock came again. I forced myself to look. Through the narrow gap in the curtain, I saw headlights cutting through the trees. A car idled in the clearing, engine running. 2 silhouettes sat inside. A family. The door rattled gently. "Hello," a man called. "Sorry to bother you. Our GPS died, and we saw your lights." The cabin thrummed with anticipation. I felt it open itself wider, stretching the hallway, warming the rooms. I stepped outside and raised my hands. "You cannot stay here." The man frowned. "We just need to rest. Our kids are exhausted." 2 small faces pressed against the back window. My stomach twisted. "I have food," I said. "Water, blankets, but you cannot sleep inside that building." The woman leaned out the window. "What are you talking about?" The ground vibrated. The cabin pushed. I stumbled, fighting the pull. "Please listen to me," I begged. "Take what you need and keep driving." The children began to cry. The cabin whispered, "You can save them all, just once." I remembered the stretcher, the rain, the sirens. I shook my head. "No." The man's expression hardened. "We are not leaving our kids out here." The front door creaked open behind me. Warm light spilled out. The children fell silent. The woman stared. "It looks safe." I turned and slammed the door shut again. The cabin screamed. The forest recoiled. I backed away from the family, shaking. "Go," I shouted. "Now!" The trees began to close in on the road, branches weaving together. The engine stalled. The children screamed. I ran to the car and shoved it. The man turned the key again. The engine coughed. The cabin roared. The forest resisted. The car lurched forward. Branches snapped. The road reopened. The car sped away, taillights vanishing into the dark. I collapsed. The cabin shuddered violently. Inside, something broke. A beam cracked. Glass shattered. The cabin howled, not in rage, in pain. For the first time, it had wanted more than one, and I had denied it. I stood there shaking, knowing what this meant. The cabin would not stop. It would escalate. If it could not take one soul at a time, it would try to take many, and next time, it would not ask. The invitations began appearing after that, not on paper, not by mail. They arrived as thoughts. I would be standing at the edge of the clearing when the forest shifted, and I would suddenly know with terrifying certainty that someone miles away had just decided to come here, not by accident. Not because they were lost, because they were called. The cabin had learned another way. The first time it happened, I felt it like a hook behind my ribs, a tug that pulled my attention north, then east. A young man driving alone, tired, angry, desperate for quiet. I saw flashes of his life without wanting to. A recent divorce, an empty apartment, a phone turned face down. The cabin whispered, "He wants us." I shook my head. "You made him want you." The forest did not deny it. By the time his car reached the edge of the trees, the cabin was glowing softly. The windows I had never seen lit before shone like eyes. I ran to the road and waved my arms. "Stop!" He slowed, rolled down his window. "Are you the owner?" he asked. I swallowed. "There is no owner." He smiled faintly. "That figures." He stepped out, shoulders slumped. I could really use a place like this. The pull inside me intensified. I tasted his exhaustion, his loneliness. I understood then how the cabin did it. It did not lure with lies. It amplified truth. I stepped closer. You cannot stay. He laughed bitterly. Everyone says that eventually. He brushed past me. The ground vibrated. The cabin opened its door on its own. I grabbed his arm. Please, he looked at me, eyes searching. Why do you care? Because if you sleep there, you will never leave. He hesitated. Just one night. The words echoed like a verdict. I felt the cabin surge. I did something I had never done before. I told him everything. The names, the book, the forest. What happens after sleep? He listened silently. When I finished, he pulled his arm free. I believe you, he said. That was worse. Then I am choosing this. He walked inside. The door closed. The cabin sighed. I stood outside all night. I did not hear screaming. I did not hear struggle. At dawn, the door opened. The man stepped out. He looked rested. "Whole, thank you," he said. "I needed that." Hope flared. "You are leaving." He nodded. "Of course." He walked to his car, started it, drove away. I exhaled. Then the guest book opened inside the cabin. A new line wrote itself. Stayed one night. The ink bled through the page. I understood too late. The cabin no longer needed to keep them. It only needed to touch them, to mark them. Days later, I saw it again. A new story on a phone left on the road. A man found wandering miles from his home. No memory of who he was. No records. No name. I dropped to my knees. The cabin had adapted. It no longer erased people here. It released them unfinished and sent them back into the world to spread the damage. The forest whispered, "This is faster." I stared at the glowing windows. The cabin was not a trap anymore. It was a source, and I was the only thing standing between it and a world that did not know it was being invited. The world began to notice the gaps, not all at once, not loudly. It started as footnotes buried in local news, small paragraphs that no one lingered on. A man found wandering without identification. A woman unable to remember her children. A teenager picked up 3 towns away with no record of ever existing. I read every article. Phones appeared now, left behind by visitors who never fully returned. I learned how the damage spread. The cabin did not take everything. It took just enough. Names, connections, anchors. People came back empty in specific places, hollow where something essential used to be. The forest hummed with satisfaction. This is efficient. I stood at the edge of the clearing, watching the road that appeared more often now. Cars did not stall anymore. GPS units worked just long enough to guide them here. The cabin no longer needed accidents. It needed curiosity. The knocks stopped. People arrived willingly. I tried warnings, signs carved into trees, notes taped to the road, videos recorded on abandoned phones. Do not sleep here. Do not enter. Turn around. They did not listen. Some smiled politely. Some laughed. Some thanked me for the performance. The cabin learned to wait. It let me exhaust myself. One night, headlights appeared in pairs. 3 cars, 6 people, a weekend group looking for isolation. I stepped into the road. "Please go back." They exchanged glances. "Is this part of it?" one of them asked. The cabin glowed brighter than I had ever seen. I felt it press against my thoughts, not forcing, just suggesting. "You cannot stop scale." The group went inside. I followed. The warmth hit them immediately. Laughter filled the cabin. Relief. I watched as the walls subtly adjusted, widening, accommodating. Beds formed where none had been before. The guest book wrote faster than I could read. "Stayed one night. Stayed one night, stayed one night." No names, just tallies. I screamed. They slept. In the morning, they left smiling, thanking me. I checked my phone. 3 new alerts, missing persons reports, different towns, same descriptions. The cabin did not need to keep them. It was seeding. I understood then what it was becoming. Not a predator, an ecosystem. And ecosystems did not care about individuals. They cared about balance. The forest whispered, "You are inefficient. You stand alone. You could help us stabilize." I felt the offer settle into me like a disease. If I guided people, if I prepared them, if I controlled the flow, fewer would break, fewer would wander. The damage would be contained. I sat at the table and stared at the guest book. The heading had changed. Caretaker protocol. I laughed until my throat bled. This is how it wins. Not by force, by convincing you that harm can be managed. I tore the page out. The cabin did not stop me. It waited. It always waited. Because sooner or later, exhaustion makes monsters reasonable. And I was so very tired. I decided to burn it down. The idea did not come with anger or heroism. It arrived quietly, the way resignation does. I had tried warnings. I had tried resistance. I had tried being a wall, a conscience, a threat. None of it mattered. The cabin did not need permission anymore, so I gathered what I could find. Broken chair legs, old floorboards that peeled up too easily, pages torn from the guest book, still warm to the touch. I stacked everything in the center of the common room. The cabin watched. It did not stop me. That was how I knew it was afraid. I struck the lighter with shaking hands. The flame bloomed small and fragile. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the paper caught. The fire spread unnaturally fast, not outward, downward. The flames sank into the floor, racing along seams in the wood like veins filling with heat. The walls groaned as if something deep inside them was waking up. The cabin screamed, not with sound, with memory. Images flooded my mind. Every guest, every bed, every name taken and worn thin. The weight of it nearly crushed me to the floor. "You cannot kill a system," it whispered. "You are part of it." The heat intensified. Smoke curled along the ceiling, but never thickened enough to choke. The fire refused to behave like fire. I laughed. "Then you are part of me too." The floor split open. Beneath the cabin was not earth. It was space, a hollow threaded with roots that pulsed faintly, each one carrying something that felt like awareness. The cabin was not built in the forest. It had grown from it. I stumbled back as the fire spread along the roots, racing outward beyond the walls. The forest screamed. Trees shuddered. Branches snapped. The ground heaved. I ran for the first time since I arrived. The road appeared clearly, solid and wide. I sprinted, lungs burning, heart pounding. Behind me, the cabin collapsed inward, folding into itself like a dying star. Light flared, then silence. I fell onto the asphalt and lay there, gasping. The forest was still. No whispers, no pull. I waited for the guilt. It did not come. I waited for the cabin. It did not return. When I finally stood, the clearing was gone. In its place stood charred earth and broken trees. I had done it. I walked until dawn found me. When I reached the nearest town, people stared, not with fear, with confusion. No one recognized me. My name did not trigger memory. Records were wrong, incomplete. I had burned the cabin, but I had burned my place in the world with it. That night, as I slept in an alley, exhausted and free, I felt something stir beneath the ground. Not the cabin, a seed, waiting. The world tried to forget what had burned. That was its first mistake. I wandered for weeks without direction, moving through towns that felt almost familiar, sleeping in places no one looked twice at, shelters, abandoned buildings, bus stations at the edge of cities. I learned quickly that I existed just enough to be ignored. No records matched me, no name stuck. Faces slid past mine without recognition. I was free. That was the lie. The first sign appeared in a place far from the forest, a motel outside Reno. I woke in the early morning to the smell of pine. It did not belong there. The carpet was stained and threadbare. The air conditioner rattled, but beneath it all, unmistakable, was the scent of damp wood and sap. I sat up slowly. The walls were wrong. They leaned inward by a fraction of an inch. Not enough to be obvious, enough to be felt. I packed and left before sunrise. In Utah, it happened again. A roadside diner where the booths were arranged too tightly. A bathroom mirror that fogged without steam. A guest book near the register filled with first names only. Stayed one night. My hands shook. I told myself it was coincidence. The seed I felt beneath the city after the fire had not stayed buried. It had learned what the cabin learned, how to travel. By the time I reached Colorado, the news had caught up. Reports of small structures appearing overnight, hunting cabins, remote lodges, rental properties with no owners listed, places where people slept and woke up lighter, not gone, incomplete. I watched a woman on the news cry because her husband had returned but did not remember their children. I recognized the hollow look in his eyes. The forest had never been the danger. The idea was, I tried to warn people again. Online this time, I posted on forums, left comments, uploaded videos. If a place feels warm when it should not, if time slips, if your name feels heavy, do not sleep. The posts vanished, accounts suspended, videos flagged. The system corrected itself. In a town outside Denver, I found the first one. It looked nothing like the original cabin. It was smaller, cleaner, modern. But when I stepped inside, the air shifted. The warmth was there, waiting. I did not burn this one. I knew better. Fire only scattered the roots. Instead, I sat in the corner and waited. That night, someone knocked. A young couple. Lost, I watched the structure lean toward them. Hungry, I stepped between. You need to leave. They laughed. We rented this place. I felt the pull again. Stronger, more refined. The structure whispered, "You cannot stop growth." I closed my eyes. Then I did something worse than burning. I stayed. I anchored myself. I pressed my palms into the wall and remembered every name I could not remember. The structure screamed, not in pain, in resistance. Morning came. The couple left confused but intact. The warmth faded. The building sagged. I understood. The only thing that stopped it was presence. Consciousness, witness. I became what I had feared, not a caretaker, a containment. I move now from place to place, drawn to warmth that should not exist. I sit, I wait, I refuse. I have no name. That is the cost. But if you are hearing this, if you feel drawn to a quiet place that promises rest, know this: I might already be there. And if I am not, do not sleep. I began to fail in small ways. That was how it started. Not with catastrophe, but with moments I could no longer hold. Places where the warmth lingered even when I sat against the wall and focused every fragment of will I had left. Buildings that did not sag anymore when I pressed my palms into them. Structures that learned to wait me out. There were more of them now. Too many. I moved constantly, following reports buried deep in local feeds. A cabin near Flagstaff, a hunting lodge outside Boise, a rental house that no one could remember listing. Each one felt familiar in a way that made my teeth ache. I could not be everywhere. In New Mexico, I arrived too late. The house was quiet when I stepped inside. Clean, orderly, no struggle, no blood. 6 beds, all empty. The guest book sat on the kitchen counter. Stayed one night, 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 stayed one night. No names. I collapsed into a chair and stared at the wall, pressing my hands flat against it, trying to anchor. Nothing happened. The warmth did not recede. The house did not resist. It accepted me like a suggestion, not a command. That night, I dreamed, not of the forest, of myself standing in 100 rooms at once, pressing my hands into walls that pulsed back, feeling my awareness stretch thin, tearing like fabric pulled too far. I woke screaming. Something had changed. I could feel the places I was not. Their hunger brushed against me constantly now, a static that never faded. The system was scaling. I understood the final truth then. Containment required sacrifice, not metaphorical, literal. I found a place that had not activated yet. A new build, fresh wood, no history, no guests. I moved in. I stayed. I did not leave. Days passed. The structure tested me. Subtle shifts. Temperature rises. Time slipping. I resisted. Weeks passed. The hunger dulled, then faded. The building stabilized. I smiled for the first time in months. This was the answer. Anchors, living ones. If one of me was not enough, perhaps many could be. I reached out online, quietly, carefully. I found others like me, people without records, without names that stuck, without places in the world. We gathered, not as a group, as a pattern. Each of us took a place and stayed. The spread slowed, not stopped, but slowed. The cost was total. No movement, no return, no life beyond four walls. I sit here now, writing this on a phone that will soon stop remembering me. The warmth is constant. The structure is calm, but something waits beneath it, learning, adapting. If you are hearing this, understand one thing. We bought time, nothing more. The houses are patient, and they will outlive us all. The invitation found you because we failed. Not completely, not yet, but enough. By the time you are hearing this, the system we built is already thinning. Anchors forget to stay. Buildings learn to wait longer. Warmth no longer fades when pressed against. The houses have learned patience better than we ever could. I am writing this from a place that does not exist on any map. It used to be a storage facility, then a rental, then nothing at all. Now it is warm. I have been here for a long time, long enough that the walls know my breathing, long enough that the structure no longer tests me. It does not need to. It has already memorized what I am. The others are quiet now. Some went silent suddenly, some slowly. I do not know which is worse. When an anchor fails, the house does not collapse, it adapts. That was the final misunderstanding. We thought containment meant denial, resistance, refusal, but the structures were never truly stopped. They were delayed, and delay was all they ever needed. You might think this story ends with sacrifice, with fire, with one last decision that matters. It does not. It ends with transfer, because the houses do not feed on sleep. They feed on permission, not conscious permission, not agreement, acceptance. The moment you stop fighting the idea that rest should be safe, the moment you think a place cannot mean harm, the moment exhaustion outweighs suspicion, that is consent. I am tired now, not the kind that sleep fixes, the kind that convinces you the world should take care of itself for a while. The walls have started offering me memories, not mine, yours, faces I do not recognize. Names that do not belong to me, places I have never been. The houses are sharing data, learning what comes next. Soon I will forget why I stayed. Soon I will believe I chose this because it was right. That is when my place will open. That is when the warmth will be ready for someone else. Maybe you, if you found this story by accident, if you pressed play because the title felt familiar, if a quiet place has been calling you lately, understand this. There is nothing supernatural about it anymore. It is infrastructure, and it is expanding. Do not trust warmth that asks nothing. Do not trust rest that comes without time. Do not trust buildings that feel patient. And if you ever arrive somewhere that feels like it has been waiting for you, do not sleep, because when you do, someone else will finally be allowed to leave. The story ends here. Thank you for watching and listening to the whole story. Please subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell to listen to the next stories.